Con Stathopoulos and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible podcast, Grow, Scale, Master.
An energetic approach to drive progress, master skills, build strengths and put the strategy back into rapid business and personal success.
Backed by real-world experience in rapid scaling to playing the long-term game of business, it's the story of all the lessons learned on the journey to mastery.
Be inspired, renew your energy and chase the future with Grow, Scale, Master.
Con, today is a very different podcast. We're actually getting to do this with you on the phone, which is going to be amazing. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. And, mate, obviously the schedules have been tight, but we want to make sure that we get a great podcast out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joshy. Thanks for making it happen too and accommodating me, Matt. I appreciate it.
Well, mate, the big conversation today, we're going to talk about that team reset. I think that as you come towards what I go to call the laggy end of the year, people's emotions are running high. There's a lot of expectations. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on over the Christmas period. A lot of people getting towards that end of yearitis and kind of losing a little bit of focus. And I love to do a bit of like a strategic reset. And, Con, I'm going to ask you like a really simple question. Like, how good are you in business? And it's an interesting one, right? Like, how do you answer that?
Mate, I don't think you can. If you're being really honest, Joshy, you can't really say, oh, I'm great at business, because I think it's kind of like golf. It's one of those things that you're a student for life. You can't really master it. All you can do is learn from it and be able to adopt and adapt to, whatever kind of gets delivered your way. So I don't think I'm really that great at business. I think I'm okay in some areas, mediocre in others, and I think overall, and I think if you ask the general population, we've got a lot to learn.
The interesting thing, I saw the latest, interview that's come out with James Packer, and, they sort of said to him, not like, where do you think you're at? And James rated himself a 5 out of 10. So, mate, if he's a 5 out of 10,
there you go.
I got a long way to go, baby. But I do like that because this whole conversation is that literally, I always think about how good are the people in your business. And I read a great quote the other day that like the best thing that you can do with an A grader is put an A grader next to them. And so this is actually a really important time to, go through your business, and whether or not you're a salesperson, a business owner, a property manager, in leasing, whatever your role is inside of the business, are there people in the business that that are striving for greatness, doing good things? They're learning, they're growing, they're developing. You can really see their growth. So from January through to now that they've actually done that. Or are there people that are just clearly underperforming, lacking motivation? And maybe could you have a conversation with them today, or could you take them to a training session, or give them a book, or give them something to try to, re-spark that energy and get them back on track? How important is that as a leader, and everyone's a leader inside of a business, to give people that opportunity to step up and to be able to play at a completely different level?
Oh, I think it's critically important, particularly this time of year, if you want to make sure that you can secure your team members moving into the new year. Generally speaking, this time of the year is when people start doing some of those self-reflection pieces and start wondering whether or not real estate's for them, or this team is for them, or this business is for them. So I think that the more generous you are with creating or helping people create their visions and creating a plan that helps them get to where they want to get in life, then the more likelihood of success, long-term success and sustainability in the role, plus growth in that role, will occur. But I think this time of the year, Josh, is a really important time to kind of reflect what worked, what didn't, what's no longer serving us, what do we need to maybe pay attention to in the new year, and kind of reset. You're either a full year into your business plan or halfway through the financial year plan. And I think this is a really good opportunity to kind of work out, hey, what do I need to adapt and adopt in terms of change for 2026? Because if we're still operating on the same operating system as 2025, we're probably not going to be, where we want to be. So I think it's a critically important time, even though it's such a big rush. The silly season is upon us. You've got, in our business, Super Saturday is really busy. You've got to clear some stock and you've got all those other interruptions. It's a really important time to be able to make sure that you got your hygiene right moving into the new year.
The thing that I like to do here, Con, is like have like a set of questions. And one of the sessions that I was in with Emily in your business on Monday last week is that we went through a couple of little questions to try to help people to reset. And the first one that I love here is like, what are your 3 biggest strengths? And I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Like, Con, let's do this through reverse. I think your biggest strengths is that, you're amazing with people. You're really good in terms of vision. And I think that like you're really good about bringing the energy inside of the business, to allow people to go to perform. And so when you start thinking about that, now that I've told you that, you go, you can agree or disagree, but hopefully you do agree with that. And then how do I lean in and do more of that? And so sometimes like having someone externally tell you what they believe your strengths are is probably one of the biggest things, and particularly people that are close to you. Do you reckon it's important now for people to start to like leverage strengths, into the new year that we go into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important, I think you just kind of really hit a note with me too, is I think far too often, definitely the space that I live in and breathe in is in the gaps. In terms of, what's the gap in the market, what's the gap in someone's performance or skill set or whatever it might be. But I think that's a really good way to look at it and go, well, how do I, improve? If I'm really good at X, how do I make that, great? Mm-hmm. I think that's awesome. I've just written that down. So thank you for sharing that, Joshua.
The next one is then, what are the three strengths that you've got to build? And so, like, I love this too, like, about thinking the opportunity and where that might go. And I'm going to say to you, like, what are three strengths I think Con could build? Maybe number one, it might be really ensuring that we've got depth of market share in each of the different markets that we operate in. Like, obviously, you've added some extra businesses, and I know there's probably some opportunities in houses or units or in different price points in some of those businesses, and also to some of your established businesses. The next one is like the continuation of building out your leadership team. You've done a phenomenal job of that, but I know that like as the business continues to grow, you're going to want those guys to do extra, inside of the business is a big conversation. And then another strength to build is that like, is just to really appreciate, the quality of the brand and what you're doing in marketplace and helping that digital saturation, in terms of what we do with their agents and the quality of their video content as an example, is a great thing that you've got. You've got a media team, but let's now start to spread that more broadly. And once you get over 100 plus salespeople, that takes a lot of energy and effort to get everyone trained to be in front of a camera. And now all of a sudden, like you kind of hear someone else externally say that about your business. Maybe some of those were like super clear to you. Maybe some of those like, I didn't see that opportunity. And all of a sudden you can go and chase that, right?
I think absolutely. I think you just probably nailed at least one that we could definitely improve on, which is, our video production experience. And I think that's really good, Josh. Like if we're not reflecting on the strengths that we've got to be able to leverage them, we're missing a really big opportunity. And sometimes, that's the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But I think the other thing is sometimes it's kind of like, I sat down with someone that we just did a merger and acquisition with recently, and I had lunch with them today, and I just said, hey, how's the experience been? What could we have done better? What did we do really well at? And I did that subconsciously, just being curious about finding that out. But I don't think that we often do that when it comes to our personal selves and also the business or the businesses or the business units that we're operating in to be able to leverage those strengths. So very good point, mate.
So the next one after that is that then, what's your biggest opportunity ahead? And, kind of, I think the biggest opportunity is just like getting everyone into your business to their potential. And that's never going to stop, because I know that we're recruiting, plenty of new people that come into the business, people at different stages of life, people have got different levels of hunger, and, and we want to like recheck in on that. And I just love that whole idea about like the biggest opportunity ahead is like really getting yourself to focus on how would we bring a team around that? How could we help people with personal productivity and performance? How can we help people to develop desire, get on a financial benchmark, like get really clear about feeling healthy and happy and successful. And I think that that's like a big little pattern interrupt that we can go to do. I think that's a nice little question. So if you just said, okay, great, I'm going to build like a little type form survey. You got your leadership team to send it out to each person and say, hey, what are your three biggest strengths? What are your three strengths to build? What's the biggest opportunity ahead for you? Like literally, and if there was one thing that we could help you with the most, what would it be? And I think that like in a couple of seconds, you'll get like a bit of a feeling. And as you go across 100 plus people inside of your organization, the key sales managers, head of property management, head of what you're doing in terms of projects and land and XYZ can then go and look at that, and you can see that there's some common areas maybe inside of the business, and then there are some areas of specifics, like let's bring some people. So, Con, that's awesome. And I kind of like this idea about like it's really about if you create the dream, that it helps you to map the future. How important is it for people to get them reconnected back to dreams? Because like in some of the training, I've heard people come to me and say, oh, the year's pretty much done, I might as well just give up now, I'll come back next year. And I'm like, hang on a second, you can reset the dreams. You can reset the goals now. You can reset it for, a nice little tiny goal that you might want to achieve by, say, December 13, about a certain number of sales or certain number of listings or certain number of listings of 2026. Like get into that position that if it's too far into the future and that's causing anxiety, and just bring that future to near to now on things that you can do to make impact. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally agree. I think sometimes, we go into different seasons too of life, professionally or personally, Josh. And I think sometimes that vision is a bit blurred. It changes. We need to, potentially look at a different set of goals or ambitions. And I think if you're not constantly allowing yourself to kind of dream and plan for what's on horizon, 1, 2, or 3, then I think you can get lost. And I think that's where the monotony of, particularly what we do with real estate, it's a very much a routine-based business that, AM for prospecting, PM for face-to-face, I've got a set to sell meeting and I do X, Y, and Z, etc. But I think if you're not resetting or re-looking at those goals, those personal and business goals, then sometimes you can have that spark start to kind of flicker. And the whole idea about this, particularly this time of year, mate, you're starting to get a lot of fatigue. Whether it's agent fatigue or principal fatigue or buyer fatigue or vendor fatigue, just fatigue starts setting in, particularly for those who haven't been running, their years adequately in terms of breaks for resetting and recuperating from the stresses of real estate. So I think for me, absolutely. I mean, we've hit so many of our goals over the last couple of years that I have found at times we've had to kind of, well, for me personally, I've kind of like sat there scratching my head, so well, what now? And I think very quickly I've realised, well, hang on a second, let's look at, what I want in life, what I want for my people in life, and what's the opportunity at hand. So I think if you're interested in getting better, you'll continue to get through to the end, and you might run, you might crawl, you might leap at it, you might retreat from it, or whatever it might be. If you're committed, you will take the time to spend to review and assess and adjust. And I think that this is the best time of the year to do that.
Experiences that rapidly shaped you.
I was really lucky that a few years ago we got the chance to see the incredible Dr. Edward Hallowell, the preeminent researcher on ADD and ADHD. And I've just read his new book, ADHD 2.0. And, there's a lot of similarities with my client base and certainly with you about those types of people. And yeah, the interesting thing that he's got in there, which I think is awesome, is that vitamin C, and it really is the power of connection, the power of human connection and being able to go and do that. And I just think that there was a quote I put up on the Instagram this morning, and it was something along the lines of, take note of how you feel when you leave people. And when you leave someone, if you feel really good, then that's a great sign that you should be hanging out more with that person. And then it started to get me to think, well, when people leave me, how do they feel? Like, are they feeling, engaged and connected and more capable and more energized or not? And I just think that at this time of the year, it's a good pattern reset. And that kind of leads you into that, that one thing that's really changed my view is that and try to remove the noise and focus on the things that really matter most. And so this year when all of a sudden the fatigue and the routine comes down and you start to come off the adrenaline run that, we've all been on over the course of the year, think about some new routines. And so for me, I've been go to bed a lot earlier than usual. I've been getting up still at a really nice early time. I'm finding some pockets of opportunity inside of my calendar. I found one this morning where I finished my PT at 5 and I could run to Circular Quay, and I caught the ferry home at 6:15 a.m. and I see the sunrise over the top of Sydney Opera House.
Oh, that's cool.
And mate, it was so funny because a client then sent me a message and said, "Oh, mate, it must be a good life to be able to be out on your boat that early in the morning." And I was like, "Mate, it was the ferry. It was $2.50, but you know what? Like experiences, and that was an opportunity that I could create." And I'm like, okay, as I start to ease off in the afternoons, I've actually got a bit of a chance that when I get home, one of the first things I can do is also go for a great little 5K walk and just get a little bit of late afternoon sun just before the sun sets, that bit of warmth that comes in. And mate, it's just a really nice way to reconnect with nature and to get back onto that. And I just think that, this is the opportunistic time that, what you do over the course of 7, 14, 21 days lets you finish what has been a really tumultuous but yet phenomenal year for people, but also too lets you set up for incredible success into a holiday period and making sure that you're coming back to that Super Saturday. And I think that you look in your business, you've got this unbelievable, big, hairy, audacious goal of 200 plus auctions that you're going to be running on January 31. That is a phenomenal thing. The energy in your business must be palpable at the moment, knowing that you're getting so close to achieving that goal, to getting those listings on and making sure we can do everything we can to hit those numbers and serve those vendors really well in marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I love that you were able to find that space in your diary that enabled you to go and have that experience, because I think that's the kind of the key to unlocking the longevity of what you're doing too, mate. Your ability to be able to kind of, that refills your cup. If it doesn't refill your entire cup, knowing you, it would. But, those little micro moments are absolute bliss. I was listening to, one idea or experience that's, kind of shaping the way that I'm thinking at the moment for me is I was listening to a podcast. And I will find it because I can't remember what it was. It may have been Brene Brown or someone like that with, what's his name? Stephen Bartlett from The Diary of a CEO.
Mm.
And if it wasn't her, I apologise. But this lady said, now these days, every time I sit down with someone, I picture them having a sign that's sitting, basically around their chest that says, "Please make me feel better than what you found me."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of reiterating what you just said, is our ability to be able to connect with people and the ability to be able to unlock magic and brilliance is a gift. Everyone's got it. So now I've been taking that into all of my one-on-ones or recruitment meetings or business meetings, and really intense, focus, great questions. I'm listening, not so I can reply. I'm listening so I can actually savor what they're saying, and more importantly, I'm trying to leave them in a much better state than I found them, and I think there's some magic in that too.
Con, it's been awesome to spend some time with you. Look forward to the next podcast.
Can't wait, Josh. Thank you, mate.